Welcome to the Advisor Summit, the podcast where financial advisors gain analytical insights and tactical strategies from the industry's top minds. The new episode is starting now. Ashley sits at the intersection of financial planning and financial psychology, bringing over 15 years of experience as a licensed marriage and family therapist, combined with her expertise as a certified financial therapist and financial behavior specialist. As a chief behavioral officer for advisory firms and host of the Planning and Beyond podcast, Ashley bridges the gap between technical financial expertise and the human elements that drive client success. Her Beyond the Plan approach helps advisors move from managing wealth to transforming lives. Welcome, Ashley.
Ashley, welcome to the Advisor Summit podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Molly.
Yeah, of course. I'm so excited to really dive in today and just learn more about what you do, because I think this topic and specifically this skill set is kind of unknown in the advisor practice, and it is so necessary. And I think we're starting to get a little bit of a concept and a grasp of what you do and how you help offices. But I think the chief behavioral officer is a key point and a key role in the offices. So I can't wait to dive in with you.
Yeah.
So let's get started kind of on your journey. So you've been both a therapist as well as a financial behavioral specialist. How did those worlds come together? And do you feel like they are a good mesh together to help you in the financial space?
Yeah, I think that, let me just answer. Let's start with just answering here first. Yeah. So my professional, at least, journey started in the marriage and family therapy space, in the mental health. It's my home discipline. And so I'd been practicing clinically as a marriage and family therapist since 2010. Which
I know
feels like a lot.
I hate doing years because I'm like,
yeah, I'm like, I can say the year, but then when I think about the math and like how many years that's been, I'm like, I've started now to go, so I started practicing what feels like forever ago in the marriage and family therapy domain, and had my own clinical practice specializing in couples and families for well over a decade. Where I started to become curious about financial therapy specifically is the conversations I was having, the couples I was meeting with, the families that I was meeting with. Money just kind of always showed up in some form or fashion. And believe it or not, they don't train mental health therapists on how to navigate money. I'll say money conversations, not from a technical side, but from an emotional side. Yeah. And so I became very curious around how do I help my couples? How do I help my families? And what do we do when we don't know something? We type it into Google and lo and behold, found and discovered the field of financial therapy. So fast forward, I kind of just followed this breadcrumb trail of curiosity and like wondering like, how can I help serve my clients? But along the way, things changed and advisors started to ask me more questions. What do I do about this client scenario? What do I do about that? And so it became very clear to me, and I was very interested at the time in how can I help serve advisors? How can I help serve them either through their clients or just directly like working with them? And from there, went on to other certifications, becoming a financial behavior specialist and chief behavioral officer, and founding Beyond the Plan, which is where I live primarily today. So yeah. There's lots of, kind of interesting details there, but that is the high level overview of how at least those two worlds come together. Do I think that I can do one without the other? I don't think that I could be a good financial behavior specialist had I not had the background that I did. Yeah. That's just my opinion. Not that there are not other great financial behavior specialists, but I do think having the clinical background that I have and the training, it just helps in so many different ways. Maybe we'll get into here.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that curiosity is what bred, you really creating this entire company and helping advisors. And it was more, there's a need here and I can fulfill it. And I love that also you're using, your studying and your degree and your actual training, because that really does take a place and makes a difference in people's lives. So for those that maybe don't know what a fractional, chief behavioral officer does, what can you talk about what you actually do inside of a firm? What are some day-to-day things? What are some overarching themes that you accomplish within the firm?
Yeah. So the way that I work, how I explain it, I want to be clear that this is unique to what we do. There are certainly other chief behavioral officers that are out there, and thankfully more and more coming into play here. And what they might do, and what I might do, like there's some similarities, but there's also some differences. And so I will share from the perspective of this is what we do, this is what I do when we come into firms. But it does not necessarily mean that this is what every chief behavioral officer does. So just making that distinction clear, because it's new. And there's not a lot of people out there. I'm trying to recruit more, but there's not a lot of us out there. So, we serve firms really in three different areas. On the client end, so providing client support. On the advisor end, so providing individual or advisor support, advisor training, but also at the firm level too, and firm support. And so we break it down into three different areas. On the client side, offering client support, we do things like one-on-one financial behavior coaching. So meeting with clients who might be struggling with, when to retire, or what do I do in retirement, or any kind of struggles that might center around identity, even spending, couples that are having a hard time spending. To that end, also working with couples who may not be aligned on goals, and that could include spending. But any type of client struggle that where there is a psychological element that is getting in the way of them thriving or following through on the financial planning recommendations. So there's a level of coaching that we do and we provide. And that is where our firms find the most value, is that type of support, is being that person that when a client, brings something up in a meeting or struggling with something, that they can go, oh, that is an Ashley conversation. And we can help, we can come in and we can take that load off of them and support the client in a, deep and meaningful way. That also is reflective of, the firm and supporting the advisor and the firm there too. There's a lot of other things there that we offer or come in and support clients on, but that is probably the primary way that we service them. On the advisor level, we do advisor coaching. And that can be one-on-one, that can be in a group format, depending upon the firm size. We'll do advisor coaching and or training. And at the firm level, we are looking at, how do we strategically, take the firm's values, take some of their even maybe strategic initiatives, and how do we make sure that for those firms where they are trying to be at the forefront, of the industry, how do we make sure that we're doing that in a way, bringing in obviously elements of financial psychology, the client experience. That's a big one right now, is how do we improve just the client experience? And so we serve as just those thinking partners at the firm level as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more to it than just what the name entails, really. It's a lot deeper. And like you mentioned, now that it's starting to kind of get out there, there's a lot of different avenues that people can take. And so one is not going to be like the other. So fair warning, do your research. If you hire a behavioral officer and you're looking for one thing and it's a completely different product offering, I think that's massive. Talking about really, in the firm itself, what is kind of a misconception that advisors have about client behavior that you see pretty often?
Yeah, what we see a lot of, well, there's a few things. One of the things that we see is advisors sometimes stepping into territory that maybe falls outside of the scope of their practice, and well-intentioned. they're great. These are advisors usually that are really great conversationalists. Like they're not afraid to like have deep and meaningful conversations, but it might fall outside of their scope, or it just may not be where, it may not be best use of like their time, and so we see a lot of like, hey, I can have these conversations. I like, but I don't know, sometimes like I feel like I'm stepping into a role that like I really shouldn't be. And I don't, maybe I can do it, but I don't really like want to, or I don't know if this is good. Like there's a uncertainty around, client struggles that come up and where is my role in this? And so, that's where we get to be your thinking partners in that and saying, yeah, that actually sounds like it would be a great conversation for us to be having with them. Or actually, you know what? How about when you see them next week, just ask like this question, or just maybe start with, and if you can just kind of do this, I think maybe that will help kind of move that conversation along. So sometimes it's just even just a little bit of coaching there. It's not like, oh no, you can't. You're not qualified to have that conversation. Sometimes it's just a little bit of coaching there. So there's this uncertainty or falling outside of kind of the scope or working outside of the scope that we see. There's also a time piece too of like, I want to serve my clients. I want to offer them like support. But I just don't have the time to do all of it. But we still want them to be supported. And so there's this tension around how do we serve clients well, especially, and I'm sure your audience has probably heard of this thing called AI. It's kind of everywhere. A little bit.
Yeah.
It's kind of everywhere right now. And so as technology, I will say more broadly, technology starts to be helpful on the technical side of things. Firms are going to want to be able to take on more clients. It's going to free up that space to be able to take on more clients. And sometimes more can be okay, but that also brings in more client issues too. And so how do we navigate that, or how do we still provide really great value for clients, if we are taking on more? So there's a few different just kind of challenges and problems. I could talk a lot about them, but those are some of like the bigger things that right now presently, like we are hearing and seeing more of.
Insane. I think too, the advisor-client relationship is so relational. It is not a transaction on so many different levels. And you think about it and you're like, you are really the guide in moving people to this next chapter. You are guiding them from retirement into a season of unknownness. And that in itself is very emotional. And I've even seen it. I mean, personally, my parents are now moving into retirement. It lasted my dad 2 weeks. He's a busybody, but it's fine. It's fine. But you see kind of this turmoil of, what do I do? What's the right answer? Is there a right answer? Maybe my goals are different than my wife's goals or my husband's goals. And I think there's a lot there, kind of, as you mentioned, that it's a very relational side. And as people are moving into AI, yes, it frees time to serve more clients, but you also want to be cognizant that can really hurt the relationship at the end of the day, because people want genuine connection. They want to know who you are. They want to trust you. They're not going to do business with people they don't like, especially in the advisor world. There's thousands of options. As much as we don't want to, you are very special, all advisors listening, but there are other options, and you need to go with those that you connect with. So I think having you come in, like you said, even on a time basis, just to talk and just to say, okay, what are your goals? And like, let's navigate this together. And you mentioned even just training them on, hey, maybe ask it this way. I mean, how often could we use that even in our personal lives? Like, okay, if I maybe asked my husband this way, wow, that would have resulted in such a difference. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just going to text you all day. Hey, so I need to ask this. How should I ask it?
Just, I've jokingly said that I should like create one of those, like, ask like Alexa,
yes, ask
for
Ashley.
and you can just ask and I'll come in and just give you feedback. I don't know. That sounds
like,
okay, I don't know if I would want it to be me. I would want it to be somebody cooler, like maybe Brene Brown or somebody like me. But
I know she's incredible too. But there's so many lessons and so much. I think you also have seen now so many advisors that you know so much more than the average behavioral officer, because you've worked with so many. So I kind of want to talk about that too. Like, what are some of the common emotional triggers behaviors you see around money? I mean, you've mentioned if spending or differences there. Are there other emotions that really come into play where it's maybe not even necessarily about the money? It's more maybe the next step and fear. So let's kind of talk and dive into that for a minute.
Yeah, so there are definitely emotions. And so this is my therapist brain coming into play. Like
Yeah.
I will name just common emotions. That includes anxiety, fear, shame, guilt, worry. These are all emotions that drive
Yeah.
behaviors. Think about it like an iceberg. What we see on top sometimes is not
Yeah.
a true representation for how big the iceberg is. So where some of those emotions then can surface to, the above the waters and what we might call more patterns, because emotions and patterns, they can be different. So there's a lot of emotions that come up around money, some of the ones that I just named there. And that can really manifest into patterns, behavioral patterns that we see. And those can include things like avoidance, a very common one when it comes
Yeah.
to making financial decisions, working through a financial plan. So, patterns of avoidance, not following through on advice that, as the financial advisor, they might be offering, avoidance around making decisions, delaying, procrastinating, pushing down the road, or avoidance even just talking about a particular subject. Retirement could be one. Certainly, if we're talking about like estate related issues
Oh,
or wealth
yeah.
wealth transfer, legacy, though there can be a lot of avoidance around having those conversations.
Yeah.
But even things like cash flow, there can be avoidance. Like I don't want to talk about cash flow, like budgeting, like
Ew.
that
It's my
feels
least favorite word.
uncomfortable, right? Yeah. And so there's a lot of emotions there within this pattern of avoidance, but other patterns, right, that we might see other than just avoidance is operating from, a place of scarcity, or even abundance.
Yeah.
There can be patterns within that. So, I like to just make this distinction that there's a lot of emotions that we all as humans experience that relate to money. But how we show those emotions can come out in behavioral patterns, and some of them are obvious and some of them are not so obvious. And so just being mindful and aware that what we're seeing on the outside, like there can be a whole lot more there just underneath the waters, underneath the surface.
Yeah, I love that distinction too about patterns. Like it's not always just the emotion, it's what's actually happening because of the emotion. And I really think procrastination or even disengagement are huge pieces of the puzzle with clients. And I know a lot of advisors feel this. And it's scary, but you have to navigate that and go through it with them in a lot of capacities. And I'm sure, like you mentioned, I mean, again, patterns, I think after you do a lot of clients, you kind of can subject it to, okay, these are the 5 normal responses. What do we do about them? Here's a game plan beyond the plan, and figure out, okay, what is that game plan? I think that's huge. And I mean, fear itself is huge in the financial decision making role. That's just, it is what it is. I think everybody fears that, especially with the economy and with the changes and what happens if this or what happens if this. There's a lot going around that. But I think too, I want to ask you how much of, financial planning is technical versus behavioral? I mean, not necessarily percentage wise, but do you feel like behavioral can really trigger even more than the technical side of planning, and in response to even creating the relationship but even navigating the relationship within the plan?
Yeah, I mean, they're two sides of really the same coin. Like you can't really have one without the other. So they go hand in hand. And, to your
Yeah.
point, like probably not we can't quantify it from like a percentage standpoint, but like they are intertwined, like very, very,
Yeah.
very deeply. You can't separate them. People think that they can.
Yeah.
Um,
I was going to say, I feel like a lot of people think that they can do that.
Probably people, and that would make logical sense, because I think that we have historically seen financial planning, money as a numbers math problem. But it really, really is not a math problem.
Yeah.
It is, as my friend Dan Halett, he says, it's a human problem. And so what does it mean then to be human, right? Well, we are comprised of, emotions. We are comprised of beliefs, these scripts, our personality traits, all of these things, right?
Yeah.
They come into play when it comes to how we think, feel, and do money, is how I frame it. And so they are very much kind of one and the same there. Understanding that, going back to just kind of that iceberg metaphor, like we have the exterior. So in financial therapy, like we call it exterior and interior finance. And so like that exterior, the above the waters, what you see, those are things like the numbers, even like the behavior,
That they're
that's
displaying, like the
right, that they're
behavior showing.
displaying. Exactly. So that could look like not sending over their statements, to
Yeah.
you, even though it's been like 3 or 4 months and they keep saying, yeah, I'll get to you. Like that's behavior that we can see. What's below the waters of that, right, is probably some emotions that are not obvious, are some, scripts and beliefs about money, maybe even some type of financially traumatic event that happened, personality traits, as well. Like there's a lot there underneath the surface that we just can't see. I share the story of this client. We'll call her Margaret. I call her Margaret when I speak. And so she had a pattern, a tendency that when she felt out of control, when she felt like externally, like things that were happening to her and she had no control over it. So that is like things like the market, like downturns, like with the market, or even like within her family system, her husband, like, had a stroke and like fell ill. Anytime there was something in her life externally that made her feel like I don't have control, she would reach for liquidity. She would call her advisor and be like, hey, I want to liquidate this part of my portfolio. I just want it in cash. Like I want to see it like in cash in this account. And like what we saw behaviorally on the outside is that she would, I'm putting this in quotes, randomly out of nowhere,
Yeah.
call her advisor and be like,
Yeah.
I need like, $60,000 in cash and I need it like, and I just want to put it in cash. Like I don't want to put it in the market. Like I need to pull it out. And the advisor's like, what? Wait, why do we have, like, why does this happen? Like, why do you do this?
And you're not tying the behavior to the request.
We're not understanding the fact that somewhere in Margaret's life, like she felt or would feel more secure having like actual, access to cash when she feels a sense of I don't have control in other areas of my life. Right. So I can't control my husband getting ill. I can't control like if the market is, on a downturn. Like I can't control these things, but here's what I can control. And that is having a certain amount of cash and having access to that. So, understanding what's beneath that as we were just kind of walking through, is, just so it's imperative, I think, to being able to work with a client well. Because imagine like not having that context or connecting those dots.
Yeah. And advisors are very good relationally, but they are also the math and the techie side too. So sometimes it's like they don't have the time to dig in and say, okay, Margaret, let's talk about what's going on. And I feel like that's where you come in, is your full focus is on the client. It's not on the technical plan. It's what's happening beyond that and what's happening with the client's life. And that's going to lead to so much more information that, okay, now we can navigate the plan itself because we have that info.
Exactly.
Huge. From the advisor's perspective, do you see any kind of wording or phrases that they're using with clients that you think they should be asking, but they're never doing that? Like anything that they should be asking to get more into that deeper? Because I'm thinking about Margaret and I'm like, gosh, how would an advisor even begin to start to navigate that conversation?
Yeah, so we teach, so at Beyond the Plan, and this is like a side note so that I can answer just this question here. Like we do training. We have an arm of training for, more enterprise firms, but we train, whether it's our enterprise firms or just our RIAs, like we train on what we call the 7 core relational skills. And so these are skills that answer, kind of that question, Molly. These skills really offer like guidance, and structure, confidence, to being able to navigate situations like that. And so what an advisor can do, so without going into all of the 7 skills because we would probably be here for longer than what our
Yeah,
time is
love it.
allotted for.
I need to learn. I'm like, whatever. No, that's you.
But how I might say is that this would fall under some foundational communication skills, and, asking questions and follow-up questions. And so what I might say to an advisor in that scenario is to make the, covert overt. So what I mean by that, and this is like a therapeutic like approach, is we see Margaret is, for the advisor, we're like, gosh, she's done this like 3 times. Like, we can't keep doing this. I might then coach the advisor to, in the next meeting or in the next call, right, to then say, hey, Margaret, I got your message about wanting to, pull some of this and put it into cash. And, I was thinking about it, and I've kind of noticed that this hasn't happened before. In fact, when I went back and looked at my notes, like, it's happened actually like a few times. And, before I move anything to cash, which I'm happy to do if that's what makes you feel comfortable, would it be okay if maybe we just talked a little bit about this, because it seems to have happened before, and maybe it will happen again. I'd like to know just a little bit more about what's going on for you in these moments. And if then Margaret's like, oh, well, yeah, okay. Like, a follow-up question, right, might then be, can you tell me, would you be willing to share with me, like, do you know or have a sense of where this comes from?
Yeah.
Do you know what's going on for you? Like, when you reach out, like, is there something kind of happening there, or certain thoughts, or like, what do you think about this pattern? Sometimes I like to like get curious also with the client too. Like, what do you think? Have you noticed this? Like, not like a game or to be like condescending, but just like, what do you think? Can we be brainstorming partners here together? So I would actually coach the advisor to become curious and ask questions. Name the pattern, like, name what you see and say, I've observed this. And what do you think about this? Right. And Margaret might say, you're right. And I just feel like I don't have control in some of these others. I don't like what happens. I don't know what to do, but it just makes me feel safer seeing cash in the account and more of it. Because if I feel like if I need to do something, then I just have access to it. And that's a whole lot of information. That she's given you. And what that could result in then is, as the advisor, making sure that she has, maybe it's beefing up her savings in her savings account to make sure that she has, maybe at all times, like a certain amount of cash just there on hand that she can, point to or look at. So I would use one of our foundational communication skills to kind of help coach and direct, to ask questions and to ask follow-up questions to understand that better.
Yeah, I feel like I love this, and this is huge. And again, even for the advisor, but also for personal life, if you ask questions, they will give you the puzzle pieces. Like, all you have to do is put together. I think so often when clients come into advisors' offices, they think that they have to have all of the answers and they have to be ready. But a lot of the times it's just navigating conversation, and it's navigating, hey, how do I ask this so I get the correct answer back? And I was even at a training event that I spoke at last week, and I was sitting there listening to another advisor after. He does not even talk about the technical plan in the first meeting. He will say nothing about the entirety of the plan. He goes, I have learned I need to listen. I need to listen to their goals. I need to help them feel heard. I need to ask probing questions so I understand why they have these goals. He says, I do not whip out the word annuity, managed money. I whip out nothing until the second meeting after I've had them in my office for an hour listening to their story. And I thought that was so impactful. I'm like, gosh, how many times are we just trying to make this transactional and rush through it and be like, cool, what's your goals? I'll plug this in. Awesome, sounds good. This is your cash flow. This is what you need to do, blah, blah, blah. Let's move on. It's really asking the questions and diving deeper. And again, someone like you in the office is so key for that, because if the advisor doesn't have time, it's like, great, we have another resource that can step in.
Yeah, I would agree. There's a great quote that makes me, when I hear you say that we floats around kind of in the therapy world, and maybe you've heard it too, but the expression goes that clients don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so hearing like that advisor's way of like working, like, is just such a great reminder that, and that's so true. Like, I think about my own relationships with like providers or like professionals, like they, I mean, I think they're very intelligent. Like, I think my doctors are
Sure.
intelligent. I think
Yeah,
our
huge.
attorney and like our seat, but like, there's probably other professionals that are just as intelligent
Just
or
as
more,
smart.
but what
Yeah.
keeps me coming back is that I know they care about me,
Yes. Yeah.
more so than just how much they know.
Right, exactly. And how you can communicate that to them. And it is interesting. Like when you find a good doctor, you're like, man, you actually wanted to sit and listen. I just remember I have this one and I'm like, it was for the most random thing. And he came and sat down and he was like, tell me everything from beginning. And I'm like, what doctor isn't like, okay, what is wrong? Okay, cool. Here's your script. Bye. It was like,
Yeah.
tell me every symptom, everything. I was like, oh, geez, this is a lot to get a colonoscopy. But,
Yeah.
like it wasn't even like something fun. It was a colonoscopy. Okay. Like
Yeah.
not fun, but it was just so kind about it. And it was wild and so good. So I think advisors fair warning, just take note. Like you have to care about the people. And I think a lot of advisors do. They wouldn't be in this space if they don't, but how you communicate that you care is really, really impactful. And maybe there's some examples you have of language that like potentially creates more trust or momentum. Is there anything you recommend to advisors? Obviously there's kind of the foundational side that you were talking about, but any kind of context clues or just phrases you recommend advisors using?
Yeah. So some of our other skills are around like collaborative decision making. And this is kind of falls under, communication, but also like in being collaborative. So phrases like, would you be willing? So this like almost permission kind of giving language, like, would you be willing to share? Or like, would it be okay if I shared some thoughts and feedback here?
Love that.
Asking like for that buy-in. It sounds weird. And I think most advisors are worried that clients are going to be like, yeah, like,
That's why I'm here, dummy.
but it lands so much differently, like in the moment. And it empowers like the client. They feel like they have a say. It feels collaborative and it doesn't feel like, things are just being dictated to them. So from a language standpoint, using like permission giving language, asking, would you be willing? Would it be okay if I shared? Statements of validation, like that makes so much sense to me. That did not take a lot of effort for me to just say that right now. Like that makes so much sense to me. But instead of just responding, like a client shares the answer, like this isn't like a ping pong like match.
Yeah.
Like you ask the question, the client answers, you ask the next question, the client answers.
Yeah.
Like taking a little bit of time to distill their answer and validate what it is that they shared. Like, obviously not every single time because then that gets weird. But, if they are sharing something that could be, potentially vulnerable, just saying, hey, that makes a lot of sense to me. Like, I can see why you would think that, or I can see why you guys made that decision, or would want to do that. Like, that makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you for sharing that. Also saying, thank you for sharing that with me. It's this way of, so the word that I want to use is condition, and I don't want this to come across as like
No, I think that's fair.
manipulative or
No.
like we're playing a game here. But when we say things like, thank you so much, I'm really glad that you shared that with me. It's like telling your client, like, do more of that, keep doing
I feel
that,
like it's
keep
giving
doing
them
that.
permission. Like, okay, I was safe to share that. I can probably share more. You
Yeah.
know?
We're telling them what we want and what we need, like what is
Mm-hmm.
helpful. And people want to be helpful. Clients want to be helpful. And so, but they also need to know like what is helpful, right? Certainly like answering like your questions, but maybe there's other information, context that isn't just how much is in your 401k. Like maybe there's other
Okay.
context there that is helpful and meaningful and impactful. And so just taking a second or two to say thank you. Like, I'm so glad you shared that. That's really helpful for me as we go to build this out, or as we look at like the next year, and think about like what the tax strategy should be. So those are just a few that I think can go, they're simple, but they go a really long way in changing the conversation and thus the relationship.
I love that. I mean, I even just think in personal life, thank you for sharing that. Or, may I share? You know, I think that's huge. And like you said, it's not necessarily conditioning. It's more just allowing them to feel like, hey, I said something and it was received well. I think that's going to be more often where people are going to be able to talk more openly when they're heard and when they are received well. That's important. So I think that's huge. And I think that's maybe a way that advisors can kind of conquer difficult conversations and maybe confrontations that they aren't necessarily skilled at. And it's like, okay, let's actually just dive in and make the covert overt. Like you said, just make it aware, make it out there and put it out on the table. I love that. We at Track Advisor do a lot of data tracking and we do a lot of metrics and KPIs. Are there any behavioral kind of KPIs that we could talk about, or what should firms be paying attention to in terms of any metrics to be tracking for behavioral sources for their clients?
Yeah, I think a lot of firms, they track like satisfaction, and
Okay.
certainly that's great. Like that's meaningful. Like how satisfied are they? But where the disconnect can be sometimes is that they often equate like satisfaction to either referability or even like motivation, or like, yeah, like I'm in it for like the long haul. Too.
Yeah.
Like just because a client's satisfied doesn't mean they're not going to leave you. Like,
Right.
they're just satisfied like in, with the services in the moment. So, I think satisfaction is great, but it's not the whole picture. And so a few other things, I think that client or that advisors, could be looking at, when they're tracking things are things like, are, are we like meeting and working towards, do you feel like we're making progress towards like your goals, like making it more just like individual? How like prepared do you feel for the next chapter? And, maybe if you're working or if you specialize with retirees, how prepared do you feel like going into retirement? Like for the next chapter. So I think that there's a few things that can track or that can, look at readiness, that can look at preparedness, but also like motivation, like how motivated clients are feeling towards, taking change, making changes. But there's also, maybe this is a little bit too like kind of in the therapist-y kind of lane, but I actually look at couples and, find couples alignment as a really big predictor for financial success. And so even just being able to ask about like how aligned do you and your partner feel like on your financial goals? And if it's we don't feel aligned and you're like, oh, I would have never thought that. But that makes sense because Joe's the only one that comes to the meeting. Like Mary doesn't ever come. Well, I guess that makes sense. Like there's an opportunity there for, I'll use the word intervention. Like I know that's more of a medical type of
I understand that.
like wording there, but there's an opportunity there then to, okay, we need to do a little bit more work with Mary and seeing like how we can get her more involved. And then how can we get both of them a little bit more aligned? Because, that all will impact like, bottom line, like revenue, if Joe were to pass, like, do you think Mary's staying? No. Like she didn't feel aligned with her husband. She knew that you were very aligned like with him. And so I think tracking like couples alignment, how aligned like they feel can be one, just very easy, like an easy one to like ask, and you can do it on a scaling question. Or I'm sure Molly, like you probably have a great way of like, being able to help like with that. But I think that can be just a real opportunity for advisors there. Beyond that, I think there are just things like tracking anxiety if you wanted to, but that I think I don't know if I think that is or would be necessarily really helpful depending. There's just a lot of factors, I think,
a lot of variables.
Exactly.
I think you can be anxious one day you come in because of some external factor that the advisor has no control over.
Right. But something like couples, like feeling like aligned, like with your partner, that's usually not going to ebb and flow like week to week.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
usually going to be just like a longer span or time horizon. They're
Sure.
feeling aligned or like not aligned. So that is one that I am probably
Yeah.
most interested in.
But that makes sense. I mean, even when my husband and I were doing our financial planning and stuff, they make you take a risk assessment test to say, okay, who's more aligned with risk? Like, who's willing? Are you aligned in that sense of the word? Like, how, aggressive do you want to be? And my husband and I are both very big risk takers. So we're like, yeah, 100%. Like, just do whatever. Like, let's go for it. Like, we'll figure it out. So, but for someone that maybe is risk averse versus risk prone, it's very tough to say, okay, how do we from the technical side even navigate that? You can't.
Exactly.
You can't have both. You can't be risk averse and risk prone. Like, that just doesn't work. So I think that's a huge KPI to track, is what the alignment of the couple is, both in risk and just in general, is huge.
Yeah.
Kind of as we're closing up here, I want to talk to you about like leadership and kind of firm growth. And when you see firms that struggle to implement behavioral health and in their finance world, why is that? Why do some advisors just really not look to implement this or struggle to implement it as a whole?
I think that there's this misconception that it is like either some advisors are good at it or not. Like it's like you either got it or you don't, Johnny over here is a great conversator. He's just a good people person, right?
Sure.
So it just comes natural. So I think the myth here, misconception, is that, some of this it just has to come natural or it doesn't. And what advisors don't realize in part of, why we teach the skills is that these are actual skills that you can learn how to do.
Right.
This isn't, like a personality trait, this isn't like a big 5, personality assessment here where we're evaluating like, these factors, personality factors. Like, these are actual skills that you can learn. Like, you can learn how to be a good conversationalist. You can learn how to listen actively. You can learn how to ask questions and guide the conversation in a collaborative way when making a financial, decision, or even how to navigate sensitive conversations like death, divorce, medical like hardships. These are skills that you can learn. And so I think advisors don't know that. They're like, oh, like I just thought like, well, I'm not a therapist and I'm just not like good at it. So I don't know. There's the other side too that we hear a lot is like, well, I don't want to be a therapist. And, just because you learn communication skills or you learn emotion regulation skills or how to set boundaries or, collaborative decision-making skills, it doesn't actually
There's so much,
it doesn't make you, it doesn't make you a therapist. And, I will say, jokingly, but it's actually not like really a joke. Just because you ask somebody how they feel does not make you a therapist.
I love that.
It doesn't, but it might just feel uncomfortable and unnatural. And I get that. And so I think there's a lot of education that is needed in terms of, dispelling some of these myths, understanding that some of this is really about like learning and growing and developing a certain skill set, just like learning the technical side. Like, there are technical skills within financial planning and there are also relational skills that should be learned. So I don't know. I could sit here on my soapbox and like talk for a very long time.
I know. I love it. But I feel like there's already things that advisors, even just from our short conversation, that they can implement today and really move the dial, or, even reach out to you. I guess that's a great question. If people do want to start working with you, what's the best way for them to reach out with you? You obviously have a huge skill set that's so needed, not only for the clients maybe, but also just coaching the advisors. Hey, here's a few things that's going to help you, longevity for the client, but also get down into what they're actually feeling and understanding. So if people want to find you or work with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, so I host the Planning and Beyond podcast, and that is probably the fastest, easiest way to get a feel for the work that we do at Beyond the Plan, who I am, just the types of conversations there. So you can subscribe to that on most podcast channels. That is a great place to engage. I hang out on LinkedIn a lot. So,
Yeah, that's how we met. I
It
love
is. Yep. I think I'm the only Ashley Quamme in the finance space, I think.
So far.
So I hang out there on LinkedIn a lot, but you can also check out our website, www.beyondthefp.com. Shoot us an email, check us out there. We love getting messages. We love having conversations. So feel free to reach out.
I love that. And yeah, and kind of as we're closing today, just our last question at the Advisor Summit is always, where are you trekking today? Something personal or professional that you're trying to accomplish in the next year?
Yeah, so I have been on more of a personal, like, wellness journey, and so I have been tracking what I've called like my 3 anchors, and so that is my daily steps. Daily step counts, trying to get to 12,000 steps a day.
Okay.
I work from home, sedentary life. So,
Yeah. Get the walking pad. I'm not joking. The walking pad's a game changer.
I have heard that. I do like being outside and like doing like my morning and afternoon walks, there. But so I've been tracking my daily steps. I have also been tracking my daily protein intake. And so trying to meet that, which is so hard.
Okay, I feel this too. And they're like, you need a gram per pound per day. I'm like, oh my gosh.
It's
and my
a lot.
doing it too. And he's like, I need 240 grams of protein. I'm like, bro, like I hit like 120 and I'm like, I did great today. And I'm not 120 pounds.
Sometimes like 120 is absolutely like a stretch even for me. So, but I try. I will say that
egg whites kill it, girl.
I do try. Like I try. I keep on trying. So I track my protein. I track my steps. And then, so I just turned 40 in April. And I do train, like I lift weights, like, I train like strength training twice a week. I do some other forms of exercise, but I've noticed that I've been so tight here in the last 6 months. And so I've been trying to do more mobility, like stretching and 15 minutes of that at least a day. So those are my 3 anchors that I'm tracking right now, that I try and strive for like each day. And it's hard.
It's hard. I think it's hard too. I mean, you're obviously running a firm, you're trying to be a good spouse and mother and all of the things. And that's a lot to add onto your plate. So I'm proud of you though. Like, even
thank
just
you.
The fact you're tracking, I mean, you know how we are about tracking, like that's huge in itself. But if you don't know it, I mean, my husband and I are also on this whole, which I think it's just taking over right now. I think everyone's realizing like, okay, it's actually important. And the more we can give ourselves and be well, the more we can give the business, and the more we can give others, and the better we can serve clients and our families. And I think it's important. So I'm rooting for you. I hope you hit your daily protein goal every day. It's so fun.
I will email you and hit you up.
I know. I want to know. So, but Ashley, thank you. You've been awesome to have on. You've just given us so much knowledge in this space and in this place, honestly, I didn't know much about until I met you. So I'm excited to kind of see where your journey goes. And I appreciate you sharing your wisdom.
Awesome.